Greetings. My name is Jeff Stite, and I am going to share with you a short story on how a simple impediment challenged systems within an entire global organization and also challenged them throughout an entire nation. So let me tell you a little bit about me first. I am a Scrum Trainer Fellow from Scrum Incorporated. I'm also a certified enterprise coach by the Scrum Alliance. My focus as a coach, a consultant, and a trainer is on global organizations that build global value with global teams. I really have a lot of experience coaching multi-team organizations, working on many different continents. I'm making this recording sitting in Cascade, Michigan in the United States, but I regularly work with teams all in organizations all over the world, and that's my focus. And once we can start traveling internationally again, as well as working remotely, I am very much looking forward to getting back and working with people from many different civilizations throughout the world. So let me give you a little background in the story I want to share with you tonight. Recently, I was working with a global IT services firm that employed teams in multiple cities in India, and they were all working to implement a new CRM system for a client in Indianapolis, Indiana in the United States. So the development teams and the Scrum Masters were for all these teams were in India, and the product owner was located in the client in Indianapolis. The story I'm going to share with you is a story that of an experience at three teams in Chennai in southern India, that's in Tamil Nadu, and they shared a small open office space. The staff there all worked off of desktop computers provided by that global IT services firm, but those firms those computers didn't have any external speakers. And so when there was any Scrum event that required web conferencing, they couldn't really use their computers for any kind of audio. So they had to dial in from their phones using the speaker phones on their desks to dial in. They couldn't use the audio features of the web conferencing system. As a result, you had all these different speakers going in the small space, multiple conversations going on at the same time, even from people that weren't on these teams. And so it was almost impossible to hear what was going on during any of these Scrum events. It was particularly a bad impact on the daily Scrums. The Scrum events I observed, most of the team members really just tuned out because it was almost impossible to hear anything that was going on. And so they just tuned out and just responded when a Scrum Master called on them to say something. And that's not a workable situation for a Scrum team. You have to be able to freely collaborate, not just with each other, but in these times where we're doing work remotely all over the world, you've got to be able to communicate clearly across borders and across the planet. So there you see the impediment that they were experiencing here. Let me tell you a little bit about the structure of how they used Scrum at Scale to remove most of this impediment. So the client was adopting Scrum at Scale for the entire program and within their entire organization. And they required the global IT service provider to staff dedicated co-located teams at each location. They had teams in four different locations, four different cities in India. And they had co-located teams with Scrum Masters at each one of those locations. Now, the teams that I am referring to here in Chennai worked together with two other teams in Coimbatore, also in Tamil Nadu, with their product owners in Indianapolis. And all of the teams, both in Coimbatore and Chennai, were located within things called special economic zones. And we're going to, the impact of being in a special economic zone is something we're going to talk about a little later because it had an impact on this impediment. But you had five teams working together between two cities And so they had a scrum of scrums, so they could all be accountable together, that they maintained for those 5 teams. They included their leadership for those teams, both from both the global IT service provider and the client. And then this entire development program had an executive action team that had a VP level membership from both the global IT service provider and a client. So you see they're using Scrum at scale right from the team to the Scrum of Scrums, and they have an executive action team going to support this entire development effort. So now we're back to these 3 teams in Chennai that are experiencing this communication problem, that they don't have any audio tools on their computers, and so they're using desk phones and nobody can hear. And the solution to this was pretty simple. The solution was headsets. If individual headsets could be plugged into all those desktop computers, that would allow everyone to speak and hear clearly through the web conferencing system, so they could focus on the interaction they're happening continuously. They could actually engage in a conversation. They could, the focus to see each other and see what they were talking about. This is what is absolutely required when you have a global team working on building stuff together like this. And it was a very simple solution, we thought, but that's when we ran into our impediment. So, the entire purchase amount for all these headsets, for all these team members, would probably only be about $500, right? It's a volume. They could get a good volume discount to buy about 30 headsets for people. But unfortunately, because they wanted to purchase 30 headsets, the purchasing unit of the global IT services firm said, well, if you're purchasing that many, we have to go out for bids. And so you're not going to be able to, it's going to take a minimum of 6 weeks to get through the bid process. That was just the purchasing rules of this global firm. And so the impact of this is that you're going to have 6 more weeks of impeded communication between the teams between the people of the teams working between the 2 cities in India and their product owners in the United States. Completely unacceptable situation to begin with, and it's an unacceptable delay that this was going to carry on for 6 weeks. The Scrum Master tried to get purchasing to change their minds about this. They refused, so the Scrum Master then promoted that impediment to the Scrum of Scrums. Well, the Scrum of Scrums was not ready to challenge the global purchasing organization. They just didn't have the stomach to try to take on this big global purchasing organization. And so they told the Scrum Master, you know what, we think you're just going to have to live with this. It's just purchasing. It's just what happens in a big organization. So you just got to live with it. The Scrum Master knew his teams were impeded, and he wasn't willing to wait 6 weeks for that impediment to be cleared. And so he promoted that issue to the executive action team. And the executive action team really saw what was going on here. And the executive from the global IT services firm saw that his staff was, this is a multi-million-dollar contract that the service firm had with the client, and the purchasing organization, his own staff, his own direct reports refused to challenge the purchasing organization over a $500 purchasing decision that was impeding the work of staff on a multi-million-dollar contract. And so during daily Scrum for the executive action team, he turned to his direct reports and he said, I've been hearing about this impediment for 2 weeks, and I really don't want to hear about it again. And his direct reports got the message, and 2 days later, not 6 weeks, but 2 days later, the purchase was executed and the headsets were shipped. But the impediment isn't quite clear. I mentioned before that these teams worked inside something called a special economic zone. So these special economic zones, as you can see, they're large office parks with some really monstrous sized buildings in them. And some of them employ tens of thousands of people easily within these parks. And companies that locate their facilities in these special economic zones get really good tax benefits from locating their companies in there. But in my experience, that all is not great. They get great tax benefits from it, But many special economic zones, in fact, everyone I've ever been in, has all kinds of bureaucratic rules about purchasing stuff and shipping it into the special economic zone, where you can locate people in the offices. It went down to what seats they are sitting at. So there's all kinds of bureaucratic rules, and in this case, it impacted this team. There was an approval because you were purchasing a physical product to be shipped in the special economic zone. Somebody had to stamp a piece of paper and approve that purchase to be delivered inside the special economic zone, probably to monitor whether there is some kind of taxes or getting paid or not paid or something like that. For whatever happened, it caused many more days of delay in getting the teams these headsets because of this this bureaucratic rule inside the special economic zone. Nobody at the service firm is ready to attempt to do this. And in my experience, this is an issue at special economic zones all over India. There may be a very good reason for the policy, but the bureaucratic system that is used to uphold the policy causes huge impediments for teams. And so it not only impedes the teams, but it impedes the impact of the special economic zone, because it really creates difficulties for people freely doing business in there. So this is actually an instance where a scrum master was raising an impediment on a simple thing, a $500 purchase to purchase some headsets, had to get it escalated all the way up to the VP level to get it to remove the 6-week delay. But nobody was really willing to challenge the government on the special economic zone on these other bureaucratic systems. And so just a quick conclusion on this, this is an instance where if you're a scrum master, you really have to be accountable and committed to causing impediments to be cleared. And sometimes that can be a pretty scary challenge. This was a really good scrum master who was really committed, not willing to allow his teams to be impeded for 6 weeks. And so he was very willing to promote that issue all the way to the executive action team and get that impediment cleared. He wasn't willing to challenge the government on the delays caused by their bureaucracy. But with practice, I think a great Scrum Master can even take issues like that on. This really demonstrates, if you're practicing Scrum and Scrum, how a great executive action team can quickly eat those impediments by breaking rules around bureaucratic functions, which is exactly what you needed to happen in this case to make a $500 purchase on a multi-million-dollar contract. So the work of healing the system, right, with why this kind of impediment should even happen in the first place, because it really shouldn't. You have to work towards having these impediments not happen, and work toward a minimum viable bureaucracy that still remains within this organization. But the point of this whole thing is how small impediments can challenge bureaucratic systems on a scale that nobody realizes. I've seen this in many different organizations I work with simple policy decisions cause huge impediments that can impede the work of hundreds of people for no other reason than somebody needs to say a yes or a no on something. And so to fully clear those impediments, you really have to be willing to challenge a lot of these old systems, not within the organization, but often with an entire country. So I hope you enjoyed this story and you learned a little bit from it, and good luck clearing all those impediments.